And good morning. Another week, another podcast. Thank you all so much for joining us. The past 2 weeks, we've done Dolby Atmos content creation podcasts with special guests, mixers that are actually working in the industry. And today is going to be kind of a step back to look at the 30,000 foot view of Dolby Atmos. What it is, what the existing consumer ecosystem is, and how people are actually hearing a Dolby Atmos at home today. So let's see here. Yeah, I think we have most of the folks on board. As we go along, please use the question function to ask any questions you may have. I'm going to stop after each chunk and take a few questions. And Mark Chesler is on the line with me from New York. He's our content partner account manager, and he's going to be fielding the questions for me. And so let's go ahead and get started. I'll put up my screen here, which you now ought to be able to see. Okay, here's what we're going to cover. Still getting my buttons figured out. There we go. So like I said, first of all, we'll just give you a whole Dolby Atmos overview, the company, and then how the codec came about and what it actually does. We'll talk about the existing state of the content and consumer ecosystem. The whole point of that is to sort of point out, look, this isn't sci-fi or the future. This is today, and it's been in consumers' homes for 5 years. So I want to give you a taste of that. Then we'll go into the professional ecosystem and the existing Dolby Atmos content creation tools. And then I'll actually launch a Pro Tools session and launch the Dolby Atmos renderer right on my laptop, and I'll walk through some of the key features of the software. All right, so here we go. First of all, who are we as a company? We're based in San Francisco. I'm in the Burbank, California office, but there's about 2,300 of us around the world, almost 50 offices in about, in over 20 countries. Most of those offices are closed right now because of world conditions. I'm currently in my home office, but we are still working at 100%, and we're pretty proud of that. So Dolby has been around for decades, involved in the motion picture and the broadcast industry, patents, Emmys, Oscars, and we've been in literally tens of thousands of motion pictures. Here's our mission statement. We advance the science of sight and sound to create and enable spectacular experiences. So, at the heart of things, storytelling is always what's most important, but we leverage our technology to enhance storytelling to make it as impactful as possible. So, the history of the company, Ray Dolby started us back in London in 1965. And his first goal was just to make music on tape sound better, to get rid of that background analog tape hiss. And so the company started with noise reduction. And then in 1971, with the Clockwork Orange, they decided, you know what, we can apply noise reduction technology to the cinema. And so that's when Dolby noise reduction first got into the cinema. 1977, Dolby Surround came about. It was actually called Dolby Stereo, but it was the first analog surround format that went out at a really mass scale. A Star is Born, the Barbra Streisand movie, was the first Dolby Surround movie, and then Star Wars was number 2. And then Dolby Surround came home into a broadcast over 2 channels. 1992, Dolby Digital came about. It was the first digital 5.1 format in the cinema. And then a few years later, that came home to broadcast. So that's kind of been our pattern, is invent technology for the cinema and then bring it to the home. And in 2012, Pixar's Brave was the very first Dolby Atmos movie to hit cinemas. And then a couple years later, once again, Dolby Atmos came home. And so that's really mostly what we're talking about today. This slide has a whole lot of content about Dolby Atmos technologies just over the years, but November 2019 was a huge month for us. Dolby Atmos is already well established on Shiny Disc, on streaming services like Netflix was an early pioneer, but November 2019, a couple of big things happened all at once in that month. Apple TV Plus started delivering Dolby Atmos specifically for Apple Originals. Disney Plus lit up, also capable with Dolby Atmos, and both of those services have Dolby Vision as well. And then on the music side, Amazon Music and Tidal both launched Dolby Atmos music streaming, and we'll talk more about that a little bit later on. But that's the state of the industry today. Dolby Atmos at home has been around for a good 5 years or so, and it's been very successful. So when we developed Dolby Atmos, we didn't want to just do another channel-based surround format. First there was mono, and then stereo, then Dolby Surround, then digital 5.1, 7.1. We didn't want to just do another X.1 surround sound format. We wanted something that was a little bit more future-proof, a little bit more true to creative intent. And that's how we developed Dolby Atmos. And there are two things that make Atmos special. Number one, just like in real life, it's truly three-dimensional surround sound. It's not just in a ring around you. You also hear sounds overhead, again, just like in real life. And number two, Dolby Atmos is what we call object-based audio. Since the beginning of recorded sound, audio was channel-based. With object-based audio, we're always able to deliver the truest possible creative intent to the listener. So with channel-based audio, sound is always mixed to speaker channels. And the problem with that is that every room is different, whether it's a cinema, a mixing studio, a home theater system, or somebody just listening out of their TV. Every room is different in terms of number of speakers, location of speakers. And so you're not always, with a channel-based mix, you're not always assured that you're getting the truest creative intent. With object-based audio, every piece of sound called an audio object is mixed with positional metadata that travels with the mix all the way to the playback environment. Because again, every room is different. And the Dolby Atmos decoder in every listening environment knows how many speakers there are in that room and where they are. So audio objects don't always come out the same speaker channel. They always come out the correct point in space, which in one room might be one speaker, another room might be another speaker, or a combination of speakers. So from a very high level, that's what Dolby Atmos does, and that's how we preserve the truest creative intent. So here's a little bit of an illustration of that. Here's channel-based 5.1. So 5 channels plus a subwoofer going to your left, your center, your right speaker, and then a whole bank of speakers for the left surround and a whole bank of speakers for the right surround. It's a one-size-fits-all channel-based solution. With object-based audio, all right, here's this cute little bird. He is a single mono audio object. And again, mono soundtrack, and he's defined in space, remember your high school geometry, by X, Y, and Z coordinates. Those are that's the metadata, the positional metadata that would travel with that cute little bird. And in addition to position, there are a few other object parameters, such as size. You can have a large audio object or a small audio object. And then also correlation. Is it really point sourced in space, or is it a little bit more diffuse where you can't tell exactly where it's coming from? So those are some of the metadata parameters that you can use with audio objects. So metadata is the whole key to Dolby Atmos, as well as Dolby Vision, by the way. It's kind of our philosophy for how you optimize every experience for the environment. Because again, just like I said about audio object metadata traveling to every decoder, because the decoder is what knows how to properly fill that individual room that it's sitting in. Dolby Vision does the same thing. We send color grading metadata all the way to the television because each TV, every different make and model knows what its maximum capabilities are, and it's able to display that picture to its best capability. So again, metadata is the key to everything we do with Dolby Atmos as well as Vision. This is why they don't let me do PowerPoint very often, because this is the kind of goofy thing I come up with. Dolby Atmos is carried by 2 of our current existing codecs. Our lossless variable bitrate Dolby True HD, which is primarily for shiny disc, Blu-ray, and Ultra HD Blu-ray. And then Dolby Digital Plus, which is our constant bitrate codec, also used on disc, but primarily for streaming and broadcast. Our next generation codec, Dolby AC4, which has already been ratified by the ATSC 3.0 spec for linear broadcast, that's also capable of carrying Dolby Atmos. So, we're at what they call peak TV. There's too much good stuff out there for people to watch. And so the challenge is, how do you make your content compelling? How do you make it stand out from all the rest of the other content out there? But at the same time, delivering an advanced technology, how do you make it easy to mix and master and publish without costing a whole lot more in time and money? And that's one thing that I'm going to show you what we accomplish with Dolby Atmos. How do we create a compelling experience, but also not excessively complicate the workflow? So, and again, we want to deliver the best possible experience for every consumer environment, whether it's a home theater nerd like me with speakers all around the living room, or somebody just listening through a $300 Dolby Atmos capable soundbar. So this is kind of cool. This is what the Dolby Atmos content ecosystem looked like when Atmos at Home first launched. just a couple of traditional Hollywood and streaming studios, a couple of AV receiver brands, Ultra HD Blu-ray disc players. That's kind of what we launched with 5 odd years ago with Atmos for Home. And this is what it looks like today. An amazingly rich ecosystem of content creators, distributors, and consumer electronics manufacturers, all enabling the Dolby Atmos experience in the home today. Atmos in cinema, like I said, Pixar's Brave was the very first Dolby Atmos cinema title, and since then, over 1,700 movies have been released to movie theaters in Dolby Atmos. Here's a couple of the latest, and of course, we're kind of on pause in the cinema world right now, unfortunately. But if it's a big or even a medium-size motion picture release, chances are it does feature a Dolby Atmos mix. On the home side, getting close to probably just about at 800 feature films that are now available in Dolby Atmos at home, whether it's on Blu-ray, Ultra HD Blu-ray disc, or streaming services like Apple TV, Movies Anywhere, Vudu. You can get to Dolby Atmos from all of those streaming platforms. And most of the top-selling discs are released with an Atmos soundtrack. I love this slide because in terms of what's available to consumers, Atmos isn't just for pew-pew sci-fi. It's for, of course, big science fiction features and series like The Mandalorian on Disney Plus, Carnival Row, which is really cool, kind of fantasy steampunk style series on Amazon Prime Video. But also little slice of life movies like Alfonso Cuarón's Roma, which is on Netflix. After his experience with Atmos doing Gravity, he said, "Oh, I'm doing all my movies like this." And so even though Roma is a black and white period, slice of life, from a child's perspective growing up in Mexico City, kind of basically his experience and his memories, he wanted that to be as visceral as possible. And so the sheer use of sound objects to create that three-dimensional texture really brought that movie alive in a special way. Feature film remixes and re-releases. Apocalypse Now, the final cut, is out on Blu-ray and Ultra HD Blu-ray with an Atmos mix supervised actually by Walter Murch and Francis Ford Coppola. Series like Jack Ryan on Amazon Prime, streaming original features like Uncut Gems, series like Lock and Key, which my kid loved, on Netflix. It's a lot of different types of entertainment genres that are all utilizing Dolby Atmos to their best potential. Our Planet on Netflix, nature documentary. You feel like you're in the jungle, in the rainforest, in Antarctica, all these different environments. It really makes you feel like you're there without a whole lot of tweaky sound effects and mixing design. Atmos is a really powerful platform to give you kind of that you're there experience, again, with all of these different types of genres. Excuse me. So music, this is really fun. Like I said, last November, Dolby Atmos Music came about on Amazon streaming music and also on the Tidal service. And already there are thousands of pop songs that have been remixed into Dolby Atmos. For better or for worse, Warner Music Group and Universal Music Group own basically 2/3 of the world's music publishing, and they've both committed to essentially remixing their entire pop music catalog in Dolby Atmos, which is really exciting for us. I love this quote by Sam Lindley. He's the SVP of Indie Distribution Strategy and a mixer himself with Universal Music Group. And this really kind of summarizes what Atmos does for music. It's a new way of expressing yourself, and talking about going from 2D to 3D, you go from being a painter to a sculptor. So that we think speaks to the power of what Atmos can bring to music. So UMG alone has outfitted some of their key studios with Atmos, near-field Atmos mixing environments. Capitol Records in Hollywood, Blackbird Studios in Nashville, and of course Abbey Road in London. They all have basically sonically identical Dolby Atmos mixing rooms. And those rooms are humming basically 24/7, putting out Dolby Atmos music content with creative involvement. The artists themselves or their producers or mixers, they all have a hand in this. It's not something that the label is just arbitrarily doing by themselves. And the feedback from the creative community has been really special. Alicia Keys, for example. We gave her a Dolby Atmos music demo several months ago in our New York Soho event space. And literally days later, she said, "Oh, I'm going to mix my next album this way. This really excites me. This is something I want to do. And this is what I want to bring to my fans." And like she said herself, it's like hearing my music for the first time. So here's how people are getting an Atmos music experience at home right now. First of all, the Amazon Echo Studio, which launched last November, It delivers a Dolby Atmos music content through Amazon Music. It also upmixes stereo content to Dolby Atmos. And a cool thing about it is it tunes itself to the listening environment it's in. It uses those 5 onboard microphones, which aren't spying on you, and it listens to the reverberation return from the room, and so it actually tunes itself to be appropriate to the space it's sitting in. So as you see from the cutaway there, it's got an up-firing driver, a left, right, and a forward, as well as a downward ported subwoofer. It's a really neat piece of kit, and it sounds spectacular, especially at its price point. It's $200 US. Not that I'm trying to sell them, but it's an amazing experience for that amount of money. You can also array 2 of them together, and you basically tell the Echo Studio app, you're the left one, you're the right one, and that'll actually give you a full Dolby Atmos home theater experience because they will work in concert with each other. On the title side, Android handsets, later generation Android handsets that are Dolby Atmos capable, you can get a binaural Atmos headphone experience through the title streaming service for about $20 a month. And you see the actual UI there when you call up a song that has a Dolby Atmos enabled mix. It says Atmos right in the app on your phone. So how do we actually bring Dolby Atmos home? So stepping back to a traditional sound for picture, here's a Dolby Atmos equipped typical movie theater. You see speakers all around the room, as well as 2 rows of speakers overhead. And it sounds awesome, but we know that's not a practical experience for 99% of consumers at home. So how we bring Dolby Atmos home is with our companion technology, Dolby enabled speakers. It's basically audio ventriloquism. In this model, you see sound firing up and bouncing off the ceiling to create the illusion of sound coming from overhead. And Dolby Atmos, because of the decoders because of the mix and the decoding being object-based, the mix doesn't just upmix or downmix to the speaker count. It actually scales to whatever the room environment is, and the object steering is much, much more precise than you would get by upmixing or downmixing channel-based experiences. So this room right here, this is 7.1.4, left, center, right, pair of sides, pair of rears, and then 4 up-firing speakers. In my apartment, you can see the surrounds behind me. I have a 5.1.4, so traditional home theater 5.1, and then just adding 4 up-firing speakers. So how do you do that? You know, it's not just for your home theater nerds like me. The home theater nerd experience is what you see up in the top left there. But say you already have a surround sound system, you don't want to throw in the wood chipper and start over. You can just add on to that system with an Atmos capable receiver. And then like you see in the bottom left there, those up-firing modules that you just place on top of the speakers you already own. And there's 50, 60 something manufacturers doing Dolby Atmos products. So chances are there's up-firing modules that might be a cosmetic match to speakers you already own. But again, we know that's the home theater nerd experience. Most consumers don't do that. That's why we're so excited about Dolby Atmos capable soundbars, like you see in the upper right there. They started like around $300 US. If you walk into Costco, almost the first thing you're going to see is stacked high and deep Dolby Atmos soundbars from manufacturers like Vizio and LG, starting in the low single hundreds. And that's something that really excites us because this delivers Dolby Atmos truly to the masses at a price point that people can appreciate and enjoy and still get a great Atmos experience. And as you see on the bottom, Atmos is also built right into some televisions. Basically, the little chimneys on the back of the panel that give you those up-firing overhead experiences. So those are some of the many ways that consumers today can get Atmos experiences at home. And again, you walk into Costco and you buy a soundbar, a lot of people are getting Atmos capability without even realizing they're specifically shopping for that feature. So that's something that's really cool to us, is broadening the footprint of consumers that can hear Atmos. All the major CE brands are represented with Atmos capable product. And here's kind of the overall scope. Lots and lots of hardware manufacturers, broadcasters, and pay TV services, as well as content partners are delivering Atmos experiences and hardware into consumers' homes today. So once again, this is kind of the top level message, is this isn't sci-fi in the future. This is already happening today. And that's why we're so excited to get creatives like yourselves on this call that are interested in the technology and contributing to the platforms. Finally, this quote from Apple, this was at the last Worldwide Developers Conference, and Apple doesn't talk about other companies a lot, but they specifically called out Dolby when they said Apple TV 4K is bringing you Dolby Atmos, and it's fully supported on Apple TV Plus. So we appreciate that vote of confidence from Apple and from all the other streamers and manufacturers who have invested in this technology. So at this point, I'm going to pause. That's kind of the consumer ecosystem vegetables portion of our presentation today. And Mark, you got any questions for me?
Yeah, so I've got a few. Some of them are more relevant, I think, to later on the presentation, so I'll hold off on those. But one that I do have right now is uh, is the Atmos music tracks currently targeted to Echo Studio, Amazon, and Android phones and Tidal. They
Mhm.
want to know if those same tracks are ever made available more widely. Will they play back in a full Atmos home theater?
Um, I hate to say this, no comment. Those are the two currently supported platforms, and no one's more excited than I am to be able to get Atmos Music playback in full-on home theater systems. It's up to those streaming services themselves to announce their future compatibility plans beyond their own devices and beyond mobile. And we have every confidence that is going to happen, but that's really their news to give. The technology can certainly do it. It's certainly streamable to a broad multiplicity of devices. But again, it's up to the individual services. And we also expect there to be more services delivering Dolby Atmos experiences. And so that's, again, it's going to be their news to give, but all signs truly do point to yes.
So a few other things here, actually, just to mention is that I wanted to clarify that Blackbird is not a UMG facility. I think that's to
True.
make
Yeah,
sure.
that is. Yeah, thank you. That is an independent facility, but they're doing a lot of UMG work there. But yes, they're not owned by that conglomerate. Thank you. I appreciate the clarification.
So, and then another question that actually just came on here that I think is very interesting is how do we go from being Atmos consumers to Atmos creators?
Wow.
That's a
That's a
heavy
great.
question.
So we'll get into the tools a little bit later. You'll see that the Atmos content creation tools are available at a really low price point, and it's not too difficult to add on capability either in, say, a 5.1 or a 7.1 room to bring it up to full Dolby Atmos capability. And also with Dolby Atmos Mastering Suite and Production Suite, you can also work binaurally. So the used car salesman in me will say you can literally work on a laptop with, say, Pro Tools and Dolby Atmos production experience and a decent pair of headphones while you're sitting on an airplane. So there are lots of ways to become a Dolby Atmos content creator. And again, when we get into the tools conversation in the second half hour, we'll absolutely get into that.
Okay, and some of these other questions are related to binaural and binaural streaming options, so there's a lot of interest in that. So I'm sure that's part of the second part of this presentation.
Yep.
One other question that I have for you is, you mentioned cinema and you mentioned home entertainment, and obviously with everything happening with COVID-19, uh, is something mixed in Atmos for cinema easily transferable to a home Atmos system, a home Atmos mix?
Okay. Yeah, good question. It's there's nothing special about Atmos that makes it harder or easier to translate from a cinema mix to a home entertainment mix. If you've ever, we've all had the experience of sitting at home watching TV and the action scenes are too loud and the dialogue is too quiet. And even with, say, a 5.1 movie, a cinema mix has wider dynamic range because it's a controlled listening environment. So loud can be louder, quiet can be quieter. You're not sitting at home trying to listen to that mix with the kids yelling in the next room and somebody's lawnmower outside. So for a home entertainment mix, you need to constrain the dynamic range a bit. You need to do things like towing in some of your front on-screen pans, because in the home, usually the speakers are outside the screen versus behind the screen like you have in a cinema. So the changes you would make to adapt a cinema mix to home entertainment aren't really because it's Atmos, it's just because it's a cinema environment to a home environment. It's the same type of tweaks you would make to a mix that you would do with, say, a 5.1 channel-based mix that you would with an Atmos mix. I will say that home entertainment Atmos mixes scale in the other direction, scale up to cinema playback really, really well without a lot of intervention. So we found that, when you're mixing a wide dynamic range for cinema, it's best to do a little bit of tweaking when you're converting it to a home entertainment mix. But going in the other direction, home mixes we found translate very, very well to cinema.
Okay. I
And
think
also
that a
mention
lot of the,
music.
sure.
There's a special thing happening right now. Pearl Jam's Gigaton, their latest album just recently came out, and it's available streaming as a Dolby Atmos and Dolby Vision experience right now on Apple TV Plus. I believe it's just through the end of the month that there's this special window where they're offering this up. But if you have the Apple TV Plus streaming service, you can listen to Pearl Jam Gigaton for free in Atmos and Vision. It sounds spectacular. I've listened to it
I
myself a
think
couple.
I think we've already
Really?
missed that. I think it's already passed.
Pardon me, Mark?
I think it's already passed. I think
Oh,
it's
it's already
streaming.
passed?
Yeah, it's still up there. It's not just not free.
Oh, okay. Well, buy the disc. All right.
Um,
So let's move on. Let's get back
yeah,
to get into the next section here and to go into the professional ecosystem and the available content creation tools. So from a really, really high level, here's the Dolby Atmos mastering workflow. You start with the Dolby Atmos enabled workstation, generally Pro Tools, Nuendo, um, DaVinci Resolve with the Fairlight engine. And the workstation, that's where you actually perform your mix. And from the workstation, the Dolby Atmos renderer receives three things, basically the three components of the Dolby Atmos mix. So I talked about objects already, and you can have up to 118 audio objects in a Dolby Atmos mix. You also have what we call beds. It's basically a channel-based component of the mix. And the bed configuration is 7.1.2. So regular home theater 7.1 with stereo overheads. So, and creatives can choose to mostly just mix in the beds, mostly or even entirely just mix in objects, or what most people do is use a combination of both. So anyway, the beds, the objects, and the metadata all go to the Dolby Atmos renderer. And the renderer does two things. Number one, renders the audio into the listening space, whether it's a speaker output to a mix room or does a binaural headphone renderer, so that you can listen to your Dolby Atmos mix on headphones. And the renderer is also where the Dolby Atmos master file is written. And there are a couple of different master file types. First of all, the very first master file type that you may have heard of, we stink at acronyms at Dolby, by the way, the DAMF, the Dolby Atmos master file set. And it's a set of three component files, the file name .atmos, which is basically like the table of contents, the file name .audio, which is all of the beds and objects interleaved into one giant file, and then the .metadata, which is self-explanatory. So that's the DAMF set. And it's a proprietary Dolby created file format. There's an open standard format, which is what most streaming services are receiving as their mezzanine deliverables from an Atmos mix session, and that is an ADM-B wave. That is, again, an open published industry spec that a Dolby Atmos mix fits inside that, and it's a single file with all of the audio and the metadata in that file. And then the Atmos renderer can also render out channel-based deliverables. And I'll show you actually how we do that, but it can create, once you finish your Dolby Atmos mix, from that you can create a 5.1, a stereo, an LTRT, M&Es, stems, all of those can be output or re-rendered from the Dolby Atmos master file, either in real time or faster than real time as an outboard rendering process. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But from a high level, that is the entire Dolby Atmos workflow. So there are two Dolby Atmos mastering or renderer tools that we have. It's basically the Tesla and the Camry. So first of all, let's talk about the Tesla. That's our Dolby Atmos mastering suite. People also frequently refer to it as the RMU. When Dolby actually, we built and delivered rendering and mastering units to cinema mix facilities. The RMU was kind of the first name for the Atmos renderer, but the product is Dolby Atmos Mastering Suite. And it's a full hardware and software solution. It's available for Mac and PC. Comes with MADI as well as Dante IO. You can choose which one fits your physical plant better. It includes 3 seats of Dolby Atmos production suite. That's the Camry. I'll talk about that shortly. And it's available by our authorized Dolby reseller network. We have how many resellers, dealers? About 12, 15 around the world, Mark?
correct.
Yep. Okay, cool. So again, it's available from a reseller network, and they will actually spec and build the product for you so that it's turnkey. They deliver it, and here you go, plug it in, and it's ready to rock. Like I said earlier, when we designed Dolby Atmos, we didn't want it to be, geez, another format we have to wrestle with, in addition to all the other formats we're already making. So we've made the re-rendering and mastering process as easy as possible to deliver not only your Dolby Atmos mix, but also your channel-based re-renders or your bed or your stems or your M&Es, et cetera. We also have re-render trim controls, and again, this isn't something that is specific to Dolby Atmos. This is something that happens with lots of mixes where you have, say, a 5.1 or a 7.1, which sounds awesome exactly as you love it, but then it down mixes, say, to stereo to play out someone's TV, and suddenly the surround effects are drowning out the dialogue. In Dolby Atmos, it's the same thing. You're still putting 10 pounds of stuff into a 2-pound bag. So we developed re-render trim controls where you can actually shade the contribution of some of the different parts of the mix in the re-renders so that every mix will sound great. So with the re-render trim controls, you're just setting metadata that does not affect the Dolby Atmos mix itself at all, but the metadata travels with the mix, and then in the playback environment, those trims will be applied if what's being played is actually, say, 5.1 or stereo. So again, lots of ways that there's lots of tools that we put into the mastering suite that make it easy to create your re-renders and also make every mix sound just as good as you want it to. These are some of the most recent features we've developed for larger rooms that were previously not certifiable as a Dolby Atmos for home. We now have array functionality. So for bigger mix rooms where you have like whole banks of speakers for your sides and rears, we can now split those into arrays instead of individual point sources. We actually also have a music optimized panner. We were talking about Dolby Atmos music earlier, and so we're supporting that with the Atmos Music Panner with features like automatic beat detection and sequencing. And it works with more DAWs as well. You can use Apple Logic Pro, Ableton Live. So it expands the footprint of Dolby Atmos capable DAWs specifically for the music creation industry. And we also are fully compatible with IMF. You may have heard about the interoperable media format. It's basically the Uber mezzanine file format that some streaming services and studios are starting to package their masters in. The IMF is essentially the Uber master that has anything you could possibly need for any deliverable of a production. So it will have, say, the theatrical release of a movie plus the additional scenes for the special unrated version. It'll have all the different language units. It'll have all the different subtitle units. It'll have metadata for things like broadcast or airline cuts. And so a studio can just archive that one ginormous IMF, and then down the road they can say, I need this version, and the IMF package has all the information it needs to automatically render that version. And so coming back to Atmos, Dolby Atmos is fully compatible with IAB, the immersive audio bit stream that goes inside an IMF. And our tools are capable of encoding, transcoding, and mastering in that IAB format. Also MP4 export, excuse me. I love this feature. So, back in the day, people mixing music, they would finish their mix, they would run it off to a cassette tape, and then run out to the driveway and stick the cassette in and see how the song sounds in a typical consumer environment. We do sort of the Dolby Atmos equivalent of that. The Dolby Atmos renderer now allows you to create a Dolby Atmos master file and then render it into an MP4 container. It'll encode the audio to Dolby Digital Plus, and it will wrap it in MP4. And then you can put it on a thumb drive and stick it right in your Blu-ray player. So, just like you used to do a music mix and then dump it to a cassette, now you can do a Dolby Atmos mix and put it on a thumb drive as an MP4 and get that immediate feedback on as to how it sounds like in a consumer environment via that feature. So that's something that I think is really exciting. Certification. We offer studio certification. We don't plug it. We don't twist arms for studios to get certified. If facilities want to get certified, we will consult with your blueprints, make sure the drawings are as they should in terms of speaker location and distance. We'll spec the equipment to make sure it can actually perform in the, for the given room volume. We will consult with the installation. We will actually come on site and tune the room and train the engineers as to how to mix in Dolby Atmos. And you get a fancy plaque and trophy and a listing as a certified studio on our website. So in the US, it's $4,000 for initial certification and then $2,000 a year for each renewal. Again, it's not something we're pushing, but it's available if facilities see marketing value in it. So, and as of this month, there are quite a few enabled and certified facilities around the world. We've sold over 350 Dolby Atmos mastering suites all around the world. We know of at least 200 rooms that are currently operating, and over 60 of them are currently certified. And they're in all these cities that you see popping up all around the world. So we try to gather this information so that if a company comes to me and says, hey, we have a show we want to mix in Chicago, I can tell them where, what facilities in that city are available. So we love when facilities contact us to say, hey, we have a Dolby Atmos certified room or enabled room. Great, we'll add you to the list. So Dolby Atmos Production Suite. So I talked about the Tesla and the Camry. Here's the Camry. It's a lightweight solution that runs on a Mac laptop on the same machine that your DAW is running on. It's optimized for simpler projects, doing like sound design, editorial, mezzanine file QC, so that you're not occupying your big room just to do QC passes. Deliverable rendering. Once you have your Dolby Atmos master file or your ADM-B wave, you can put it in Production Suite and render out your stems, your M&Es, etc. And it's also great for student environments, whether they're in a small mix room or mixing on headphones. It's on the Avid store for $299. You can also get a free 1-month demo if you register at developer.dolby.com. And Avid is also offering right now a Pro Tools Ultimate free demo while people are sitting at home these days. So you register for your free demo for Pro Tools Ultimate, you register for your free Dolby Atmos Production Suite, and very quickly you can get into learning how to mix Dolby Atmos for yourself. So here's some great news about Dolby Atmos Production Suite. The latest Pro Tools update from late last year, it actually enables 130 channels of audio across the Dolby Audio Bridge via Core Audio. Previously, the maximum count was like 32 tracks. And to do a full Dolby Atmos mixing session, previously you had to use this elaborate send and return routing song and dance. And it was pretty complex, and it also had issues like automatic delay compensation from one track to another, depending on the number of processes you had on each track. Sends and returns didn't calculate that. Now with the Dolby Audio Bridge enabled, you can actually do full Dolby Atmos mixing straight from the outputs instead of using sends and returns. And in our latest version 3.4, we added features like a loudness measurement and a soft limiter in both Production Suite and Mastering Suite. Production Suite now has a built-in linear timecode generator plugin for more accurate alignment with your audio workstation. And we added the down mix and re-render trim controls that were previously only in Dolby Atmos Mastering Suite. So a few slides ago, I said good news. Now, whenever somebody says, here's the good news, there's a little bit of bad news. It is a one-way path. There is no real-time re-render return back into Audio Workstation for like recording back your stems into the DAW immediately, or going back to the DAW with like a 5.1 re-render to go into an outboard loudness measurement tool. Production Suite has its own loudness measurement, but some people like to use outboard plugins, and you don't have that routing path available with Production Suite. You don't have DSP processing for plugins when you're using HDX. You don't have the external synchronization. And of course, there's general processing overhead concerns. You're not going to do a giant sci-fi epic with all 128 channels flying around with Production Suite. You don't have multi-system support. You can't fly, for example, stem players into an Atmos recorder. And Production Suite doesn't have room EQ or B-chain calibration, and it doesn't have support for arrays. But it's $300. And it's an amazingly, well-featured piece of kit for that. And major streaming services like Netflix, for example, have already come out on record and saying, hey, if you deliver good content to us that sounds great, Dolby Atmos Production Suite is a perfectly valid tool. We don't mandate that you have to have Mastering Suite in order to deliver to us. Production Suite is a fully professional working system. But we are embedded in basically all the major manufacturers of audio workstations and mixing consoles. So you don't have to throw out all your gear and start over if you're getting into Dolby Atmos. Kind of the flagship tool for Atmos mixing is the Avid S6 console. And what you see moving around there is the Dolby Atmos Panner plugin that Avid actually designed for doing Atmos object panning. And they built neat features right into the console, like being able to do panning with your finger on the S6 touchscreen. So that is really, really nice tight integration with the Atmos system. Here's the Atmos Panner for a Nuendo. You know, it does the same kind of stuff, but it's a different form factor. So mixing Dolby Atmos, you know, there is the concern that it's going to take a lot more time. It's going to cost a lot more money. There are some really great outboard tools that help deliver Atmos immersiveness with, you know, just a few tweaks. We really like plugins like the new Gen Halo Up Mixer. That's great for taking stereo or 5.1 music and expanding it into the full bed space, including overheads. And you can dial in as much or as little of that effect as you want. Another great way to deliver immersiveness with dialogue is with 3D reverbs. Are you on a metallic surface spaceship, or are you in a wood paneled room? Are you in the great outdoors? Okay, outdoors you don't have reverb necessarily, but if you're in the Grand Canyon, there are great 3D reverb tools that, again, fill out that three-dimensional space that give you that sense of Atmos immersiveness very quickly. And yes, I saw in the questions Exponential got purchased by Isotope. So yes, it's Isotope Exponential Audio. So thank you for the clarification. Dolby Atmos conversion tool. Our brand new version 2.0 just came out last week. It's kind of our Swiss Army knife. It's for file type conversions, frame rate conversions, file trimming, file padding if you need to add silence to the header tail, and concatenating the reels together, like when you're processing a cinema Dolby Atmos master into a home entertainment long play. Previously, very, very simple top level features like frame rate conversion or file type conversion were available in our older GUI, and everything else beyond that was an XML scripting process. Now everything is in the UI. And it's available for Mac, PC, and Linux, although Linux is command line only, and it's free at developer.dolby.com. So again, that's our Swiss Army knife tool in this updated version with the enhanced UI, just came out last week. I talked about IMF earlier, and like I said before, Dolby Atmos is fully compatible with the immersive audio bit stream that goes inside an IMF. And it's supported in all of our tools, and it's coming soon to third-party packaging tools. Colorfront Transcoder, Roden Schwartz Clipster, Marquise Mist, they've all announced upcoming imminent support for carrying and playing back and wrapping Dolby Atmos. So let's pause again for questions at this point. Mark, what sounds interesting? I can't talk and read at the same time.
Sorry, I was in the middle of answering a question there.
Sure.
So actually, a lot of good questions here. I'm going to start with this one. Can you mix the 5.1 and then up mix to Atmos?
You can, and in the early days of Home Atmos, that was done quite a bit. Existing features that were mixed for cinema or for home entertainment channel based, they would go back and go, hey, let's do a special edition in Dolby Atmos. Yes, you can. We think it takes a little bit more time than starting from your Dolby Atmos Hero mix and then you know, doing your tweaks to make it into a 5.1. So yes, you can. You know, how hard it is depends on how many sources you have to deal with. If you have like 5.1 stems, if you actually have stemmed out dialogue, music, and effects, and maybe even sub stems of the effects like Foley and group and spotted effects. If you have more to work with, where you can actually surgically cut out bits from those stems and drop them into object lanes and then treat them as objects, you can do that. I know of people. Tim Hogenacker last week at our Mixers Roundtable talked about one of the Jim Henson movies. I want to say it was Dark Crystal, where he basically had mono DMEs, dialogue, music, and effect stems, and then I think an LTRT M&E. And that's what he had to work with to create the Dolby Atmos mix for that movie. But you know what? It took a lot of work, but it sounded spectacular. The results were great. So the short answer is yes, you can absolutely mix to 5.1 and then up mix to Atmos. It's easier to start with Atmos and then deliver a 5.1 tweet pass afterwards.
Yes, it was Dark Crystal, I believe, that he was talking about last week. Great. So another question that I have for you is relating to Nuendo and other tools. Is the production suite only available for Pro Tools? I use Steinberg Nuendo 10. It would be great to have these tools available for that and for PC.
Right. Right now, again, at the price point that production suite is, it's strictly a Mac tool, and so that, you know, that's just how it's positioned right now. And this is ignorant of me. Does Nuendo have a Mac port? I thought that was a PC only tool.
I think it's a PC only tool. Yeah.
Yeah. So the short answer is, the primary workflow. Oh, it does. Okay. So yes. So somebody just popped up in the
Yeah.
questions.
Sorry.
I love when people put answers
Monitoring
in
as
the
well.
questions. So yes.
Okay. So yes. Okay.
Other questions?
So yeah, absolutely. So another question, can you run Production Suite on a separate machine from your DAW?
It's really not recommended because again, you have to use, so with the separate Dolby Atmos mastering suite workflow, you're actually using physical IOs to get all 128 tracks from one machine to the other. The production suite really doesn't have that kind of support, and it's not what it's designed to do.
Okay. Some other questions that I have here are, sorry, just going through these here, see what's been answered. Can you go into a bit more detail about the renderer trims? As in, explain how audio is folded down in each option.
We'll get into that toward the tail end of the presentation. So
Perfect.
I'm actually going to open up the production suite in Pro Tools and go through all the features, and we can get into it a little bit more there.
Yeah, so then I have one other question for you is, let me find it here. Actually, I lost it. Let's return to this. I'll get it at the end.
That reminds me, I should actually jump out and launch Pro Tools in my renderer. So
Okay.
yes, keep talking while I launch these tools.
Sure,
I
I'll
thought
keep
about,
going.
let's fire it up at the beginning, but
You have to
when
create,
you
do you
leave a
have,
DAW
yeah,
alone for 45 minutes and then try to jump into it, sometimes strange things can happen.
and I'm sure you're gonna actually show this too. So this is another question that I have, so I'm gonna leave it for the end here in case it doesn't get answered. But how is Atmos integrated into the video game world? How can we use Atmos files in a video game engine like WWise?
So I don't have specific expertise about gaming, but Dolby Atmos is in PC and Xbox games. So I apologize, I don't have that answer for you about what are the tools that are used, but it is available and people are mixing for gaming in Dolby Atmos,
And then
primarily for Xbox and PC at this point.
And then one other partner related question, technology partner, and then I'll let you get to this. How many of the cons of Dolby Atmos Production Suite are solved by incorporating a Pro Tools Matrix Studio, or which cons are not solved?
That is probably a longer answer than we have time for here. And I've never used Matrix Studio myself. So again, with apologies for just being the Dolby Atmos used car salesman, I don't really have knowledge about that, unless you actually do, Mark.
I do not actually, but that's
Okay.
probably a question that I'll reach out to David privately and see if we can help him out with that.
Okay. Oh, and I just learned we actually have a blog post coming up on that very topic. So stand by for that.
Okay, perfect.
Yep.
Go right ahead. All right, I'm going to hand it over back to you, Tom.
Okay. No, why don't you give me one or two more questions because I'm still loading up my session.
Sure. Okay, let's see here. So let me see what other questions I have here that will work, that are good for this area. Okay, I'm looking to build an Atmos home mixing studio, but the common configuration I've seen for this includes Avid products, which are somewhat expensive for the country I live in. Is there a less expensive option to get the 128 channels from the main computer to the RMU and then to the speakers? Less expensive than the Matrix. So again, this is probably a larger conversation, but maybe this is something that we can touch on.
Yeah, larger conversation. With Production Suite, there is the internal solution of the Dolby Audio Bridge. For Mastering Suite, yeah, then you are talking about hardware solutions that are in the mid to upper single $1,000s. So that it kind of is what it is at this point. We have those two different ends of the spectrum in terms of available solutions, and that kind of is what it is at this point.
Okay. Okay.
All right, I think I have.
Ready?
Mark, can you and everybody see? It looks like, yeah, my
Yeah.
main screen is up, and so I have Pro Tools. Okay, so right now I'm running Pro Tools as well as the Dolby Atmos Production Suite renderer on my MacBook. And here's what a typical Atmos Pro Tools session looks like. So first of all, we have our beds here. If I expand the beds, you can see left, center, right, side surrounds, the rear surrounds, the subwoofer track, and then the stereo overheads. And then below that, we have all of the object tracks strung out. In this session, we have 100 different audio objects. Like I said, you can have up to 118 audio objects. The reason for that odd number is beds plus objects, 128. And then the initial Dolby Atmos configuration, we were using 2 sets of MADI cards, which are 64 channels each for the I/O. So 64 times 2, 128, hence that number. Anyway, so we have all of our object tracks here, and on every one of the object tracks, there is the Dolby Atmos panner that looks like this. And no, I don't like that one. Let's use a different one. Okay, so we can see the session as well as the renderer right now. And in the Atmos panner, which again, there's one of these panners on every one of the object tracks. When I grab this ball and move it around, you get a visual representation in the renderer that it's also moving around there. So right now I'm only controlling the XY parameter. If I grab the height slider and I move it up, there's our Z parameter as well. So if you're using a console, you can map the 2 things to different parts of the desk to control all 3 parameters at once, or you can separately mix the X and the XY and then the Z. But we also have Z-axis helper modes. So if I go up to the front and middle of the room here, and right now this little squiggly means we're in freehand mode. If I go to say dome mode, and then I pan from the front of the room to the back of the room, we have automatic Z-axis panning to the top, and then it goes back down to the ear level in the back of the room. And that operates front to back as well as side to side. So various helper modes to automate the Z-axis, or again, you can automate it manually. Talking about the size parameters, say I have a mono track of a rainstorm. Okay, I'm gonna put it right in the top middle of the room, and then I'm gonna take the size and open it up. And now we're covering the entire room in that one mono rain track. So that's an example of how you might use size as well as positioning in your Atmos panning. So when I hit play in my session here, what we're going to see in the renderer is, actually, let's talk about the render UI briefly. So you see a purple box around the first 10 tracks. Those are my beds. And then the blue rings around these other track lanes. If there's a blue ring, that means it's an active object track. And then I'm currently set up for 7.1.4 playback configuration. So here are all those playback channels. My loudness monitoring is over here. And then this is our little 3D depiction of the room. And when I hit play on the Pro Tools session, you're going to see a little green dot moving around the room for every one of the object tracks. So if I hit play here, turn my volume down a little bit. So each one of those little green balls represents an individual object. And some of them you can see, like that guy there, that just went bigger and smaller as it's moving around. That's automating the size parameter. So this is just an example of an active Dolby Atmos mix in action. You get the visual as well as the sonic representation of the mix. So if I stop it, and there are numbers next to all of the object tracks, so you can actually see which object number is flying around in case you're trying to track down, hey, wait, what was that thing? See this big white thing in the front of the room? Music people don't like that. They're like, why do I need a screen? So we also added, okay, fine, we'll take the screen away. So now there's this view for music mixers where you just have a person's head in the middle of the room and there's no screen at all. And you can also choose whether to activate or deactivate the object numbers and your binaural settings. So in a nutshell, that is that's the construction of a Dolby Atmos mix session. Let's go into the renderer and look at the input configuration. When I talked about rendering out, say, stems or M&Es and how you can do that easily, you need to set that up in the session in the beginning. So right now you see, okay, 1 through 10 are my beds, and then everything else is an object. And over here, you can actually tell the renderer, this is dialogue, this is music, this is effects. You can group it out however you want so that you can automatically pull out your subdeliverables downstream. You can also have multiple beds if you want to have beds for all of your primary stems, like dialogue, music, and effects. Okay, here's, say, my M&E, and then I'm going to do a 5.0 dialogue stem. So in track 11, I'm going to choose 5.0, okie doke, and it's going to create my 5.0 dialogue stem, and then the first object number ripples down from that. So if I accept this, we now see our grouping has changed, that we now have our first set of beds, and then we have our second set of beds down here. That's now our dialogue bed. Now, when you do create multiple beds, you are cutting into the number of available objects because 128 is still your magic number. However, you can you can checkerboard things pretty efficiently in your track routing so that you can use those 128 available tracks to its full potential, no matter how many bed groups you have. If I go into a binaural render mode, so if you're doing a binaural mix, this is where you are this is where you're storing the metadata, where each bed or object is a near, mid, or far type of object. The default is mid, but if you want something really close and intimate, you call it near. If it's something that you want to be off the distance, then you call it far. And it doesn't affect the actual speaker playback, but that is metadata that gets stored for if the playback type is binaural. So that's where you go in to set your binaural settings. So, what I really want to emphasize here is the Dolby Atmos mixing tools, the panner, the renderer are really powerful tools, but they're not complicated tools to use. So again, the whole goal is to make it as easy as possible to deliver not only your Dolby Atmos deliverable, but also any sub-deliverables you need. So whether it's your channel-based mix, whether it's a binaural mix, this is all available in the tools. And again, creatively speaking, it's not difficult to learn. I showed you the Dolby Atmos panner and showed you how to operate it in about 30 seconds. If you already know a DAW like Pro Tools, if you already know how to write automation, to insert plugins, to actually mix a show channel-based, the technological leap to understanding how to do it in Dolby Atmos is pretty simple. So that is our lightning round 5-minute explanation as to how the Dolby Atmos mixing tools work. So we're getting toward the end of our webinar here. Mark, do you have any big questions? Throw me some softballs, man.
Yeah, I do. So this is a sort of an overarching question. How and what is the criteria to choose which sounds would go to objects versus what go into a bed?
Let me turn that up a little. I apologize. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah. How and what is the criteria to choose which sounds would go to objects versus what goes into beds?
Gotcha. Okay. So like I said, the bed mix is channel-based. It's always going to come out the same, primary speaker locations. So if that's something you're comfortable with, being all the way on screen or something like a dialogue, perhaps, you're always going to, or at least most of the time, going to have that front and center. That would probably be something that you put into a bed track. If it's something that you want to mix kind of in the interior space, where it's not, pinned to a wall or to the screen, then that's probably something you'd mix as an object. And it's interesting. What we found, what a lot of mixers have told us, is that mixing in Atmos, they actually like the channel-based re-render even better than if they had actually done a bespoke channel-based mix. Because when they're doing their Atmos mix, they're using so much more of that interior space to create that three-dimensional environment. Those interior mix moves translate very, very well to channel-based playback. So we found that mixers really like the experience of mixing in Atmos and the channel-based solution that they get out of it. And actually, if you go back to our previous webinar, where we had our mixer roundtable, they actually addressed that question very well and probably way more eloquently than I would have.
So one more question that you probably may have addressed, but I may have missed it. Using Atmos Production Suite, how would one render out a full Atmos mix? Would you then open that file in the Production Suite to render out the 715120 mixes?
Exactly. Yep. And it's faster than real time. And because Mastering Suite itself is inexpensive, or if you have Production Suite, you get 3 Mastering Suite licenses with it, and you can put it in one of your offline rooms or even in the machine room. And yeah, like you said, you just load up the Dolby Atmos master file or the ADM-B wave. It has all the metadata you need if you've set up your session correctly to automatically and faster than real time output whatever you want from that master file.
Okay. And then one last question here before we go. Can you send multiple non-object tracks to an auxiliary, which can be defined as an object, in order to pan multiple tracks as a single object?
Short answer is yes.
Okay, short answer is yes, and that's
yeah.
And do you have time for one more question?
Let me very briefly get into a little bit of housekeeping, but yeah, I'll take another question after this. I just want to tell everyone about the resources we have available. So this was our session last week. Hear from the Masters, featuring Mark Fishman, Tim Hogenacker, and Cheryl Ottenritter. And that is available on our website, so that you can listen to those afterwards, or rather listen to them right now. The previous week's session we did was about Netflix's Sol Levante with mixers Will Files and Matt Yoakum, as well as Ozzy Sutherland representing Netflix. This is cool because if you weren't at the previous sessions, you wouldn't have known about this, but whoops, I double tapped. So our takeaways from that session, we have some QR codes here. And so if you get out your phone and shoot these QR codes, it'll link you directly to the Dolby Atmos Production Suite demo license. And once again, as a reminder, Avid is offering a free 3-month, I think, Pro Tools Ultimate license, so you can use those in conjunction with each other. The Netflix show Sol Levante, which is a 4-minute anime. It's the world's first 4K HDR Dolby Atmos Dolby Vision animated anime piece. And Netflix has generously made the mix assets available to download and play with and remix yourself to your heart's content. So that's what that second QR code is. And then the sound of Sol Levante is on YouTube, just as a playback where they interview the mixers. And then Netflix Tech Blog has a piece about the project as well. Coming up in a couple of weeks, Dolby Atmos Deep Dive. My colleague Adam Pinch and I are going to talk more about what we've addressed today, and hopefully get to way more questions, because you guys had so many questions, and I really appreciate the interest. But we can actually take a deeper dive into answering some of those questions on the next session. And I'll actually do my homework and write down these questions, and I'll come prepared to kind of do a speed round answering as many of them as we can in this next session, which is going to be 2 weeks from now. So we're going to talk about object-based immersive concepts in general, spatial coding, which is something that's used specifically for home entertainment Atmos, the various delivery formats, encoder formats, and encoder file packaging. And we'll actually walk you through how to set up a Dolby Atmos Pro Tools mix session and use Mastering Suite or Production Suite, again, diving deeper into the tools and into the signal routing between the DAW and the renderer, and the outputs to the room, how to look at things like volume or loudness monitoring. So again, we go much deeper. You know what, we're going to need more than an hour now that I'm thinking about it. But that session is going to be coming up in 2 weeks.
Block out a few hours of your time that day, guys.
Yeah. So what was that last question, Mark?
You actually, no, that's good, because I think that it's the type of question that will be answered in the following session. It's okay. Yeah, I think it's a little bit more technical. So let's end it here and come back, I guess, in 2 weeks' time for the deep dive with Adam and Tom. So
okay, great. Thank you all so much for your time. I hope this was valuable to everybody that was here. We had quite a few attendees. Thanks for making the time in your day this morning in the US or this evening in Europe. Thank you again, and we'll see you at the next one.